Hello, everyone. So let's continue our discussion about the fiscal policy. And in this video, let's focus on what do we call in economics a fiscal policy multiplier. Let me explain the word multiplier, what the word multiplier means here first. So multiplier, it means that the effect of the fiscal policy tools, which are the government spending and the tax cut, as I explained in the previous video. Will be multiple, which means the impact of the government tax cut will lead. Let's say we cut tax by 20. Let's say we cut tax by 20 billion. Okay, so this is tax cut. The meaning of multiplier means what? Means that this such tax cut of 20 million will lead to an increase in GDP by more than 20 billion. Okay, let me be more specific. So for instance, if I say the tax multiplier equals 2, what does mean? So this means if we cut taxes, let's say by 10 billion, GDP will increase by 4 billion, which is 2 times 2. Okay, another example. Government spending multiplier, let's say equals 5. So 5 times. This is how we say it. So if you know that the government multiplier equals 5 or 5 times, so what does mean? This means simply if you increase spending by 20 billion, so the GDP will increase by 20 times 5, which is 100 billion. This is the meaning of multiplier here. So this means the impact of the government spending on the GDP will be more than the amount of the government spending itself. Okay, so this is the meaning of multiplier. So since we know now that there are two tools for the fiscal policy, which is again government spending and tax cut. So this means we have two multipliers, one multiplier for the government spending and another multiplier for the tax cut. So let's start with so here we have government spending multiplier. Okay, and then I'm going to explain the tax multiplier in the next slide. Okay, so here the tax multiplier, and here we have the government spending multiplier. Okay, the good thing is the formula is the same for the government spending and tax cut. What do I mean by this? So this means government multiplier equals the change in GDP divided by the change in government spending. Okay, so let me explain this. So let's rearrange this formula to make it easy for you. So this means if you want to know what will be the impact or what will be the change on the GDP because of an increase in government spending, so just multiply the change in government spending multiplied by the government spending multiplier. Okay, so these two formulas are the same, of course. I'm just rearranging the formula. So the change in GDP equal the change in government spending equal the government multiplier. Okay, and the government multiplier equals 1 divided by 1 minus marginal propensity to consume. I already explained the marginal propensity to consume before. Okay. Okay, so let's have an example just to make the idea easier for you. So let's see this example. Assume that a hypothetical economy with an MPC of 0.8. Just as a reminder, so the MPC, do you remember MC equals what? So MPC equal the change in consumption divided by the change in income. This is the meaning of MPC. So if the MPC of an economy equals 0.8 and the economy is experiencing a severe recession, by how much would the government spending have to increase to shift the aggregate demand, which is the GDP, rightward by 25 million, which means how much, if our goal as a federal government is to increase GDP by 25 billion, so how much government spending we need? So let's simply apply this formula. Okay, so we need first to find out the government multiplier. So I give you the MPC. So MPC equals 0.8. So just plug in the formula here. So plug in the numbers here. So 0.8, as you can see. So 1 over 1 minus MPC. So 1 minus 1 over 1 minus 0.8. So the government spending multiplier equals 5. Okay, so let's put 5 here. So this is 5. So I was able to find out the government multiplier from the information on the MPC. Now, let's read the question again. Am I asking about the change in GDP or the change in government spending? Actually, I'm asking about the change in the government spending, because the change in GDP is given here, 25 million. This is the amount which I want to achieve. So I want to increase the GDP by 25 billion. So here it's simple formula. We have only one unknown. So 25 billion equal the change in government spending by 5. So if you divide 25 by 5, this will give you the change in government spending. So the change in government spending equal 5 billion. So this means the government need to increase government spending by 5 million to achieve a change in GDP by 25 billion. Okay. Okay, let's have another question. So let's see. Let's look at the second multiplier we have, which is the tax cut multiplier. What I mean by the same formula, so this is going to be the same formula, which is, so the change in GDP equals the change in tax cut multiplied by the tax multiplier. Okay, this is another way to write down the formula. So tax multiplier equal the change in government, change in GDP divided by change in taxes. Okay, let's see. Let's do this question quickly. It's an easy question. So here I'm giving different numbers of GDP with different numbers of tax revenues. So the question number 1 says when GDP increased by 50, as you can see, 80, 50 to 900, 950. So the change is 50. The net tax revenue, what happens to the net tax revenue? The net tax revenue, as you can see, decreased by 10. Yes, 190. Okay, I'm sorry, it's my bad. So it's increase. Okay, so increase by 10. The tax revenue increases by 10. Number 2, when the GDP decreased by 100, so for example, so from, let's say, from 1100 to 1000. Okay, so from 1100 to 1000. Okay, the net tax revenue, what happens to the net tax revenue? The tax revenue is 220 and now it becomes 200. So the net tax revenue decreased by how much? By 20, right? Okay, now number 3. So from these two questions, 1 and 2, we can conclude that the relation between GDP and tax revenue is direct or positive. So there's a positive relation between GDP and the collected taxes. Last question we have assumed that simple multiplier has a value of 10, and that investment spending, what I mean by investment is government spending, is in the economy equals 10. So the government multiplier equals the government spending decreased by 10, and the value of government multiplier equals 10. So if we assume that tax remain constant, so the equilibrium GDP would decrease by how much? Again, so let's write down the formula here. So the change in GDP equal change in government spending multiplied by the government multiplier. So the government spending changed by negative 10. Okay, and the government multiplier is equal 10. So the change in GDP will be negative 100, right? I'm just applying the formula. Government spending will change by 10. Government multiplier equals 10. So 10 times 10 equals 100. So we expect that GDP will decline by 100 here. Okay, let's continue the question. But when the GDP decreases, the net tax revenue also decreases. And this decrease in net tax revenue will tend to decrease the GDP. Okay, so decrease the GDP. And then the decrease in GDP brought by the 10 decrease investment will be less than 100. Okay, so here this is like a quick slide about the fiscal policy in action, because one of the best example about the expansion of fiscal policy, what happened in 2007 and 2009, like the Obama stimulus package. Okay, so these are some numbers in 2008, 2009. Like for example, you can see here. Let me show you this. Okay, so let's see this. This is in 2008, 2000, from 2007, 2009. Recession was for 8 months. The decline in GDP was by 4.1%. The unemployment was 10.1%. And these are actual information about the size of multiplier. So this is the government spending multiplier is between 1 and 2.5. Okay, so these are actual data. That's it. This is what I have for the fiscal policy multiplier. So thank you so much and see you in the next video. Bye-bye.